My beloved ones, sometimes the loudest power in the world is silence. Now don't mistake me, I've danced with thunder and dined with lightning. I've spoken when the world demanded a voice. But I've also stood still while the world howled past me. And in those moments, when my tongue refused to move and my lips closed like the gates of heaven, I heard God clearer than ever before. You see, silence is not empty, no, it is full of wisdom, full of grace, full of the deep workings of the soul. And when you learn how to walk with silence, you learn how to walk with angels. When a seed is planted, my dear, it doesn't scream for the sun. It doesn't shout for the rain. It stays quiet deep in the dirt, hidden beneath the surface. And yet, day by day, miracle by miracle, it grows. And such is the journey of the soul. Be silent and let God work in you. Be silent and watch the universe rearrange itself on your behalf. There are times when we want to defend ourselves, to clap back, to prove, explain, justify. But sugar, don't you know, royalty doesn't argue in the streets. If the lion responded to every bark of every dog, he would never get to where the prey is waiting. Let your silence be your strength. Let it speak louder than your critics ever could. Let your calm be your reply, because everything you seek already hears you. There's a divine silence, child, that attracts blessings. A holy hush that calls favor like a magnet. You don't have to beg for what's already yours. Just align and receive, because silence is surrender. And surrender is not weakness, no. It is faith in motion. It is the hands-off prayer, the soul's soft whisper that says, I trust you, Lord. Even when I don't understand, even when the storm is loud, I will be still. Now, I know you've been through some things. I know they lied, I know they left. I know they didn't see your worth. But instead of shouting your pain to the mountains, whisper it to the one who made the mountains. Because he listens. He always has will. There is a time to speak and a time to be silent. Wisdom is knowing the difference. And in this age of noise, of social media shouts, constant comparison, digital desperation, your silence will be your sanctuary. In stillness, you will hear what others miss. In silence, you will be visited by visions, and the right door will open, quietly without a bang, just for you. Be silent when the devil tries to provoke you. Be silent when envy knocks at your door. Be silent when the world says you're not enough. And then, when the time is right, speak your truth, but not for validation, for liberation. Your silence doesn't mean you have no voice. It means you have mastered it. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise. It doesn't mean you're passive. It means you're powerful. Now lean in, child. Listen with your spirit. Silence is a weapon in the hands of the faithful. It confuses the enemy. It humbles the proud. It gathers strength like the ocean tide, rising quiet but mighty. When you are silent, heaven hears louder. When you are silent, the soul stretches deeper. When you are silent, the promise begins to bloom. I want you to remember this. The caterpillar makes no noise in the cocoon, but transformation still happens. And when it breaks forth, it does not announce itself. It flies. That's you, baby. Be silent now, and watch God give you wings. So I say again, be silent. You will get everything in your life. Ah, my dear child, come a little closer now. Pull up your soul and settle into this sacred place where wisdom meets your weary heart. I want to tell you something precious. Something the world has tried to bury beneath the clamor and the noise. I want to tell you that your silence, it is not weakness. No, baby. Your silence is strength. It is royal. It is divine. It is the language of those who know who they are and who they belong to. Now, the world will not tell you this. The world will try to make you believe that loud is strong and quiet is cowardice. It will parade noise as bravery and call attention power. But you must not be fooled by the glitter of performance, because real strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it says nothing at all. A tree does not shout while it grows. The sun does not make announcements when it rises. And yet, oh, how mighty they are, how dependable, how beautiful, how powerful in their silence. You see, the strongest people I've ever known, truly strong, have carried their burdens with grace and walked through fire without shouting about the heat. They didn't need to scream their pain from rooftops. They didn't curse the storm. They simply stood. They stood like old oak trees planted by rivers of truth. And in their silence, I saw courage beyond measure. You don't have to explain yourself to be worthy. You don't have to shout to be seen. You don't have to defend your truth every time it is questioned. Let your life speak, not your mouth. When you learn to be silent in the face of ignorance, in the face of provocation, in the face of the world's chaos, child, you have become a master of yourself. You have entered into a higher order of being, a place where you no longer react from fear, but respond from love, a place where you no longer argue for your limitations, but live in the limitless grace of the Most High. And let me tell you something else: silence is not passive. Oh no, silence is active. It is a decision. It is a war fought and won on the inside, because it takes strength to hold your tongue when the ego wants to speak. It takes strength to listen when pride wants to interrupt. It takes strength to bow your head when you want to raise your fists. But what the world calls silence, the spirit knows as serenity. I've seen strong women, black as the soil, bold as the wind, sit in silence while others tried to tear them down. And later, I watched as those same women rose with more dignity, more purpose, and more anointing than any of their accusers. Because silence is sacred. It's the space where God steps in and does what your words never could. There is a peace that comes from not needing to explain your journey. There is a glory that falls upon those who say, I will wait, I will watch, I will trust. It takes strength to walk away from battles that are beneath your spirit. It takes strength to hold your peace when people mistake your kindness for weakness. But you know, and heaven knows, that the still waters run deep. And you, my love, are the reverb of something eternal. Now listen here. There's a silence that comes from defeat, and that ain't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the silence that comes from dominion, from self-control, from knowing that your value isn't up for debate, that your destiny isn't up for discussion. You don't need to clap back at every criticism. You don't need to match every energy. Sometimes your power is in your pause. You are not a puppet. You are not here to perform for approval. You are not made to entertain other people's projections. You are here to walk in purpose. And purpose, true purpose, doesn't need applause. It just needs peace. Oh, baby, when you're silent, you give God the floor. You step aside and you let the Creator conduct the orchestra of your life. You stop trying to make noise, and instead you become the melody. You stop trying to be heard, and instead you become felt. Like a warm wind in winter, like a prayer whispered in the dark. Let them talk, let them assume, let them misunderstand, and while they do, you keep growing, you keep glowing, you keep becoming. And one day, without lifting your voice, your life will speak volumes, and they will have no choice but to see what God has done in you. They will have no choice but to recognize the strength that silence birthed. You don't have to shoot to be strong. You don't have to scream to be powerful. You don't have to be loud to be victorious. Be the calm in the chaos. Be the hush in the hurricane. Be the silence that shifts the atmosphere. Because strength is not measured in decibels. It's measured in discipline. Let your silence say, I know who I am. Let your silence say, I trust the process. Let your silence say, God is fighting for me, so I don't have to. And child, when you understand that, when you live that, when you become that, there's nothing this world can take from you, Because your strength is not on your tongue, it's in your soul. So stand tall, stand still, and be silent. Because in your silence, everything you've ever needed is already making its way to you. Come sit with me, sugar. Let me talk to the still part of you, the part that knows but sometimes forgets. The part that's been battered by questions and bruised by waiting. The part that wants to shout, God, do you hear me? Let me hold that part gently and say something sweet, and steadying silence is a spiritual act of faith. Oh yes, it is. Not just any faith, mind you. Not the kind you parade around like Sunday's best. I'm talking about the kind of faith that's lived on the inside, quiet faith. Old faith. The faith your grandmother wore like perfume and passed down in lullabies. The kind of faith that doesn't always raise its hands in praise, but folds them in patience. You see, beloved, there comes a time when you've said all the prayers you know, when your voice is tired from crying in the midnight hour, when the fire is still hot and the rescue seems late. And yet, in the middle of that waiting room of life, you make a decision, not to panic, not to plead, but to be still, to hush your thoughts, to sit with your hope. That is holy. That is faith. Now, don't be fooled. Silence can be louder than shouting. It takes a mountain of courage to be silent when the world is watching, waiting for your breakdown. But there is a grace in keeping your peace when everything around you is chaos. There is a sacredness in your stillness, child, because when you stop moving, that's when God starts. When you stop forcing, that's when heaven flows. There's a whisper in the silence that the world can't hear, but the soul does. The whisper of the Almighty, calling you back to trust. Trust, not in what you see, but in what you know, deep down in your bones. Beyond the worry, beyond the doubt, there is a knowing that God has not forgotten you. Oh, I've been there. I've stood in the hush of unanswered prayers. I've sat by the window looking out into nothing, wondering when the promise would arrive. And let me tell you, sometimes the answer is not a sign, not a voice, not a miracle. Sometimes the answer is silence, and the silence is the miracle. You see, silence doesn't mean God isn't speaking. It means He's trusting you to listen in a different way, not with your ears, but with your faith. Not with your eyes, but with your heart. Because when you get quiet enough, you start to hear with your spirit. You start to feel the undercurrent of divine movement, soft, slow, but sure. It's easy to believe when the doors are flying open and the blessings are pouring in. But baby, do you believe when nothing moves? Do you trust when the room is quiet? Can you sit still when the crowd is marching on, and you feel like you've been left behind? That's the test. That's the furnace of faith. And silence seed is where it's forged, because silence requires surrender. And surrender, oh child, is not giving up, it's giving over. Giving your plans over to a greater will. Giving your timeline over to divine timing. Giving your logic over to mystery. It's saying, I don't know how, and I don't know when, but I trust that you do. It's not resignation, it's revelation. It's where your soul bows, and your faith stands tall. In your silence, you are not alone. In your silence, heaven leans in. In your silence, angels take their assignment. In your silence, your tears become intercession. Do you hear me? There's a reverence in being still before God. It's how Moses stood at the burning bush, how Hannah prayed with no sound, how Mary pondered in her heart. They didn't need volume. They needed vision. And you, my dear, you are in good company. For when you choose silence over control, you are choosing intimacy with the divine. You are making room for God to move, not in your way, but in His. And His way, oh, His way is always better. Sometimes you gotta stop talking about the mountain and start talking to it. But other times, you've said enough. You've prayed, you've fasted, you've cried. And now it's time to trust. Not trust with conditions, but trust with conviction. The kind of trust that sits at the Red Sea and says, I don't know how this water will part, but I'm not turning back. The kind of trust that goes into the lion's den with peace. The kind that lays down the sword and picks up stillness. You see, faith isn't always about motion. Sometimes faith about standing. And silence, that's how you stand on the inside. When you're silent, you stop resisting and start receiving. You stop asking, why? And start saying, yes. You stop knocking on closed doors and start thanking God for what's already yours in the Spirit. Be still and know. Be silent and believe. Be quiet and let heaven speak. Because, child, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing and believe everything. Now, don't you confuse this silence with fear. You are not hiding. You are not shrinking. You are not running away. You are simply aligning. Lining up with glory, letting patience have its perfect work. And in that stillness, things begin to shift. Things begin to heal. Things begin to move in ways you never imagined. Because silence is not the absence of action. It is the presence of trust. Oh, what peace you'll find when you stop needing to understand everything. What joy you'll feel when you stop carrying it all. What freedom you'll know when you simply say, God, I trust you enough to be quiet. So hush, child, put your hands down, close your mouth, open your heart. Let silence become your sanctuary. Let it become your yes. Let it become your faith, fully alive and beautifully still. And I promise you, on the other side of that holy silence, there will be miracles waiting. Come close now, darling. Bring your heavy heart, your scattered thoughts, your bruised hope, and rest them here. Lay them down in this sacred space. And let me tell you something your soul has been itching to hear. Something the noise of the world tried to drown out. Something your spirit already knows, but needs to remember. Growth happens in quiet spaces. Yes, child. Growth does not always announce itself. It doesn't come clapping or shouting. It doesn't make a spectacle of itself. Real growth, true, deep, holy growth, moves in silence. It slips in like the dawn, soft and sure, without asking permission or seeking applause. You look around and think nothing is happening. You think your waiting is in vain. You think your stillness means you've been forgotten. But oh, precious soul, let me wrap you in truthing. What's growing inside of you is beyond the reach of eyes. What's becoming in you is a work of wonder too sacred for sound. Have you ever seen a seed shout while it grows? No, baby. It grows in the dark. It grows in the dirt. It grows while nobody is watching. And still, it becomes a tree. You are no different. You too were planted. And for a while, you thought you were buried. You thought the darkness was punishment. But I tell you today it was protection. It was preparation. God put you there to develop in peace. Where the critics couldn't see you, where the vultures couldn't reach you, where the wind wouldn't uproot you. Because sometimes the quiet is not punishment. It's a greenhouse, a shelter for the soul to stretch, a place where roots reach deep, far beneath the surface, anchoring you in strength so when the time comes for you to rise. Oh, how you will rise! You will not be shaken. We live in a world addicted to noise, to hustle, to grind, to constant updates. People want to show everything, prove everything, document every moment. But hear me, love, everything sacred doesn't need to be seen. And everything real doesn't need to be recorded. Some things must be lived in the quiet, where God speaks not to impress the crowd, but to impress your heart. That cocoon you feel trapped in. That place where nothing seems to move, where time feels suspended, where silence is the only sound. That is not your prison. That is your process. Let me take you to the butterfly, delicate and divine. She doesn't grow her wings in the sunlight. She doesn't stretch them in front of fans. She doesn't tweet about transformation. No, child, she goes into hiding. She wraps herself in stillness. And in that hushed, holy space, she dies to what she was and becomes what she was always meant to be. So it is with you. Don't curse the quiet season. Don't rush your cocoon. Don't despise the dirt. For even Jesus spent time in silence before resurrection. Even he pulled away from the crowd to pray. Even he grew in wisdom and stature in obscurity. The spotlight is not where you grow. The silence is. In silence, you learn to hear the voice of God more clearly. Not the voice of fear, not the echo of past mistakes, not the chatter of comparison, but the true voice. The still, small voice. The one that says, "You are mine. I am with you. I am doing a new thing." Don't you see it? It's in the quiet that you start to recognize yourself again. Not the version shaped by expectation, but the version born in grace. You begin to see your scars not as signs of defeat, but as sacred ink written on your skin by survival. You begin to see that maybe the silence wasn't abandonment. It was alignment. Let me tell you, child, the tree doesn't grow taller because people cheer it on. It grows because its roots are deep, and roots grow in secret, in stillness, in struggle. So, if you feel like nothing is happening, if your prayers feel like whispers into the void, if your dreams are still buried under delay, if your heart is waiting for the winds to shift, don't be discouraged. Something is happening. You're growing. Quietly, beautifully, steadily. And growth, real growth, doesn't need to shout. It just needs time. There's a tenderness in the quiet that allows healing. There's a wisdom that blooms in the hush that the noise never teaches. There's a holy hush where God does his finest work. Not where eyes are watching, but where hearts are surrendered. You think your life is paused, but I say it's being positioned. You think you're stuck, but I say you're being strengthened. You think you're invisible, but I say you're being infused with divine power. There is a blooming in you that even you cannot see yet. But wait for it. Trust it. Honor it. Let the quiet do its work. Let the silence stretch you. Let the hush become holy ground. And when the time comes, when the season shifts and the heavens whisper, "Now," you will rise not as who you were, but as who you were destined to be. You will bloom in such a way that the world will wonder where you came from, and you will smile with the wisdom of one who knows you came from the quiet. So hush now. Don't rush. Don't resent it. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are simply growing in secret. And baby, when it's time, all of heaven will say, "Look at her now. Come closer now, child. Sit here and exhale that worry from your chest. Lay down the weight you've been carrying, of doing, of trying, of striving to prove your worth to a world too busy to notice your pain. Let's speak plain today, from one soul to another, about something our ancestors knew in their bones and whispered in their prayers. When you stop chasing, what is yours will find you. You've been running, haven't you? Running for love, for peace, for answers, running to be seen, to be understood, to be held, running after dreams, after people, after promises that seem to slip right through your fingers like water in a clenched fist. And somewhere along the way your breath got short, your back tired, and your spirit started wondering, is it always going to be like this? No, baby, it won't, because you were never meant to chase. You were meant to attract. You see, when you chase, you step out of alignment with your divine rhythm. You begin to operate not from faith, but from fear. Fear that you'll be overlooked. Fear that you'll miss your moment. Fear that maybe God forgot to write your name down in the book of blessings. But hear me well, the Creator of the universe has not forgotten you. Your blessings have not passed you by. What is yours has already been spoken into existence. It just doesn't need to be chased. It needs to be received. Oh yes, there is a difference. The world teaches us to run, to hustle, to claw our way to the top. But the Spirit knows better. The Spirit knows that when you are still, when you are settled in the truth of who you are, life begins to flow toward you. The right people, the right doors, the right timing. You no longer have to stretch yourself thin trying to make something happen. You simply become what it is you're seeking, and then it comes to you. You see, sugar desperation repels, but peace attracts everything good and holy. You ever notice that when you're calm, when you're not forcing, things just work out? That's no accident. That's divine law. When your spirit is at rest, you become a magnet for the things ordained for your life, and what's for you cannot miss you. Not if you stop, not if you sit, not even if you stumble. Now don't get me wrong. This doesn't mean you do nothing. This doesn't mean you lie idle, waiting for manna to fall from heaven. No, beloved. Faith without works is still dead, but there's a difference between walking in purpose and chasing out of panic. One comes from holiness, the other from lack. When you know who you are, when you know whose you are, you move differently. You walk with a grace that says, I don't need to chase love. I am love. You walk with a power that says, I don't need to beg for opportunity. I am the opportunity. And when you carry that kind of stillness inside you, everything that's been running from you turns around and runs toward you. That's the truth. I've seen it in my own life, child. I've spent seasons trying to prove my worth, trying to hold on to people who had already let go of me in their hearts, trying to force doors open with bleeding hands. And every time, it left me more tired than triumphant, until I learned the sacred art of stillness, of trusting, of letting go. Letting go of the chase doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop striving. It means you stop handing over your peace in exchange for what was never meant to be yours in the first place. It means you step into flow. And when you're in flow, life gets sweet. It gets rich. You stop surviving and start living. You were not born to beg. You were not created to compete. You were designed to attract, to draw in what matches your spirit, to receive what aligns with your calling. And sometimes in order to receive, you have to rest. You have to unclench your fists, unfasten your fear, unwind your need to control. That's where miracles live, honey. In the quiet in between, where you trust that God is working behind the scenes, where you believe that what you've prayed for is on its way, even if you can't see it yet. Think of a flower. It doesn't chase the bees. It doesn't shout or stretch itself trying to be noticed. It simply blooms, and in its blooming, the bees come. The sun finds it. The rain nourishes it. Everything it needs comes right on time, not because it ran after it, but because it was rooted. Root yourself, love. Root yourself in joy. Root yourself in self-worth. Root yourself in the certainty that you are enough. And when you're rooted, what's meant for you will find you, because your energy will call it forth. Your peace will become a signal. Your silence will become your sanctuary, and the very thing you once chased will now knock on your door and say, I've been looking for you. It's not magic, child. It's spiritual truth. You don't have to beg for what's yours. You just have to become ready to receive it. Let the world run frantic. Let others chase their worth in the applause and the noise. But you anchor yourself in the sacred, knowing everything meant for me is already on the way. And that knowing will light a fire in your soul. That knowing will set you free. So rest now, my dear. Release the chase. Return to stillness. And wait with joy. Because the blessings, they're already coming. And when they arrive, they'll fit so perfectly, you'll wonder why you ever ran. Come now, my sweet child, sit by the fire of this old sacred truth. Let the noise of the world hush for just a while and listen, not just with your ears, but with your soul. Let your bones remember. Let your spirit lean in, because there is a wisdom that time cannot erase, a lesson carried on the wind, whispered by our grandmothers and held in the silence between heartbeats. When you are quiet, you can hear God. Yes, baby, you can hear Him. Not with your ears alone, but with every part of your being, with your longing, with your surrender. With that tender H you've been trying to silence with noise and motion. But God doesn't shout. He doesn't compete with chaos. He waits. He waits for you to hush, to be still, to lean in like a child at her mother's knee, eager to learn, ready to trust. In this world, we are taught to fill every space with sound, to scroll, to talk, to react, to perform. But in the kingdom of God, less is often more. Quiet becomes sacred. Stillness becomes holy. And in that silence, where your soul is no longer performing, no longer defending, no longer rushing, you begin to hear. Oh, child, what a sound it is. Not thunderous, not dramatic, not dazzling, but it is steady, it is clear, and it is true. You may not hear words, but you will feel the knowing, that quiet conviction that says, you are not alone. You are loved. You are safe. I am with you. That, my dear, is God's voice. Sometimes we miss his voice not because he isn't speaking, but because we are too loud to listen. Our fears shout. Our pride argues. Our worry paces like a storm. But God, he is gentle. He waits for you to unclench your fists. He waits for you to take a breath. And when you do, when you finally surrender the need to have all the answers, he speaks. He speaks in the wind brushing through the trees. He speaks in the silence before dawn. He speaks in the rhythm of your breath and the beat of your heart. You see, child, silence is not empty. It is full, full of answers, full of presence, full of God. And oh, when you truly hear him, something inside you changes. The storms don't stop, but you stop being afraid of them. The world doesn't become perfect, but you become anchored. You no longer feel like you're drifting. You know where your help comes from. You know whose hand is holding yours. And that knowing becomes enough. Some of the most powerful moments in Scripture didn't happen in crowds or cathedrals. They happened in caves, in deserts, in lonely places where the noise had ceased. Moses heard God on a quiet mountain. Elijah met him not in the wind or fire, but in a still small voice. Even Jesus, Son of the living God, went away often to pray in silence. He withdrew, not because he was weak, but because he knew that power is drawn from presence, from communion, from quiet. So why are you afraid of being still, child? Why do you fear the silence? Maybe it's because when it's quiet, you have to face what you've been running from. The grief you never named, the pain you never healed, the questions you buried so deep, you forgot they existed. But silence is not your enemy. It is your invitation. God doesn't meet you only in your strength. He meets you in your surrender. And in the quiet, he tends to the parts of you that no one else sees. He mends what's been torn. He waters what's been dry. He breathes life into what the world declared dead. But he does it softly, slowly, like a gardener tending a fragile bloom. So, hush now. Stop trying to fill the silence. Let it fill you. Let God pour his love into every corner of your heart. Let him whisper your name in ways no human ever could. Let him remind you that you are not your failures. You are not your fears. You are his. And when you've learned to listen, truly listen, you will hear him not just in the stillness, but in everything. In the laughter of a child, in the kindness of a stranger, in the peace that passes understanding when everything around you says you should be afraid. That is God. That is his voice. And it lives in you. But you must get quiet enough to remember. There is a sacred hush that comes when you stop running, when you stop performing, when you stop yelling at the heavens for answers and simply sit at his feet. And in that hush, heaven leans down to kiss the earth. In that hush, your soul remembers that you were never abandoned. You were being drawn into stillness, drawn into truth, drawn into the embrace of a God who speaks not in thunder but in love. So be still, my darling. Be silent, not out of fear but out of faith, not because you have nothing to say, but because you are finally ready to listen. And when you do, you will hear the voice that called light out of darkness. You will hear the voice that calmed the sea and healed the broken. You will hear the voice that says, "You are mine. You are beloved. You are becoming." You don't need to shout to be seen. You don't need to hustle to be blessed. You don't need to chase to be chosen. You need only to be still and to listen, for God is speaking. And child, He's calling your name.